here's fished a purple haze before? You know what a purple haze is? If you don't know what a purple haze is, it's a parachute Adams, but it's tied with a purple body. And it's a phenomenal pattern. There's something about that purple that really does the trick. So we're going to do one. This one's a fly I'm calling the tactical purple haze, because we're going to tie it really thin. We're going to tie it on a barbless hook, and we're going to change the parachute post just a little bit. So before I do that, I better put my purple thread in. Okay. So this is UTC 70 thread in purple. And I like the UTC thread because it lays down really flat. Now, the purple haze usually calls for elk hair or moose, and I've actually got the speckled moose body hair from Nature's Spirit. And it kind of has, it's not all one solid color. The tips kind of vary just a little bit, so it kind of breaks it up. So I'm just going to take a few of those, and we'll tie those in as a tail. You could also use like hackle fibers or whatever you want. On our YouTube channel, I do a nymph pattern all out of moose hair. It's called the M3 Betis, and it's really, really good. But anyway, moose is kind of a cool product to play with. If I could get it to go in my hair stacker. Okay, so I've aligned the tips, and you can see I don't have very many of these at all. So I'm just going to tie those in roughly the length of the body of the fly. Just like that. So another observation, I'm tying a parachute pattern, but you've noticed that I haven't tied in the post yet. In my opinion, if you tie in the post very first, it's just in the way. It gets in the way when you're tying everything else in, so I don't like to tie it in quite yet. So I'm just going to wrap that forward, and this is the point where I will wrap the post in. And instead of using like a polypropylene yarn that's white or cream or parapost material in white, this is a material put out by EP Enrico Puglisi, and it's called Trigger Point International Fibers. This color is called Quicksilver, and it's blended up with a whole bunch of different shades of gray. And the reason I like it is because it has a whole bunch of float mixed in with it. So you're dealing with a material that floats because it's treated. That does not look good on the camera yet. All right, don't judge the fly till it's done.
Camera doesn't lie.
Camera doesn't lie. This camera does lie, apparently. So I'm going to take out a strand about half the thickness that I want the post to be, because I'm going to double it up. You cover that up so it doesn't drive people nuts. And I'm going to tie in the parachute post right here. So some people, when they're tying in a synthetic parachute post, they'll come under the fly like this and tie it in. What that does is it creates bulk on the bottom side of the fly, and you don't want to do that. So what I do is I'll just take the parachute post and tie it right on top of the hook. And just for ease in tying, I'm going to get rid of the long part here. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to wrap up the parachute post. If you use too much tension, it will slip off. So you kind of have to baby it a little bit. I don't use a gallows tool when I tie parachutes. So about right to there. Now, once you have that parachute post wrapped up, you need to make some pretty firm wraps in front and behind just to kind of lock that down. Now you're good to go. So for the body of this fly, instead of using dubbing or a quill or a buyout or anything, I'm just going to use some Uniflex. You can use a Spanflex type material, but it's like a big rubber band, so it's stretchy. So I'll tie this in. And to tie this in flush and nice and neat, I'm going to tie it in so it goes a little bit in front of the post like that. And as I tie that in now, I can stretch this as I wrap backward, and that creates a really thin body with no bulk. So I'll wrap that backward, let off the tension, and then take my thread back up right behind the parachute post. So when I trim this off, I'm going to pull this tight and cut it, and now you can't even tell where that was tied in. There's a little trick for you with Spanflex. So now for the body, I'm just going to wrap that forward. Right behind the parachute. And tie that off with some snug wraps, and then when I trim this one, I'll do the same thing. So we've got a really narrow body there, really thin, nice and tactical. Okay, so the original Purple Haze was designed to have a grizzly hackle and a brown hackle. But to tone that down just a little bit, I'm going to use a grizzly and then a light barred ginger. This guy right here. Give me a second to find the proper sizes. If you haven't seen whiting hackle lately, it used to be that you could only get long feathers on a saddle. But for example, I'll show you the barred dark ginger. This is a cape, and we've got size 18 hackles that are 8 inches long on a cape. And this isn't a silver, this isn't a gold, this is the bronze. So we did a tour to Whiting Farms last fall, and we were talking to Dr. Whiting, and he said, I breed my birds to produce bronze. If we luck out and get a silver, gold, or platinum, then we roll with the punches. But as long as we can get bronze, then we're good. Curtis and I took a long time to do a research project as well. We determined that with one of these Whiting bronze capes, you can tie between 2 and 10 times as many flies as any other competitor in the market. And we were testing their second best grade, the other companies. This is the 4th best grade that Whiting puts out. So we literally determined a monetary value per tiny little barb of feather. We created an equation, then we counted how many feathers were per square inch in the sweet spot of a hackle. It was super nerdy, but we had lots of growers telling us, well, my hackle that I grow is every bit as good as Whiting. And we said, no, you don't understand, it's just not. So we made it scientific, we made it super nerdy, and that article that we wrote has been shared I don't know how many different times. So we are kind of chicken feather nerds. The best part is a cape's going to cost you 60 bucks. And I tie a lot, and I've been working on this grizzly for a long time, and it doesn't look like I've even touched it. So anyway, there's my plug for Whiting. As part of their pro staff, I got to do that. Now back to sizing my hackle. Sorry about that little outburst. So I'm going to cut off the parts that I don't want, the webby parts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay these hackles down so that the shiny side and the shiny sides on both hackles are facing the same direction. Now as you start to wrap this on a parachute pattern, if your hackles aren't facing the right way, you're going to get barbs that get all mashed down and it's not going to look good. But I'm going to show you a way to tie a parachute where it should be perfect. You know, like you shouldn't have any fibers that poke down. You shouldn't mess it up at all. So first of all, I've got quite a bit of bar or stem here. So this can kind of be tricky, but what I'm going to do, it's a lot easier if you're just using one hackle fiber. But I've got my thread hanging behind the post. I'm going to come up and catch my stems with one wrap. Then I'm going to advance in front of the post and catch those with a few more wraps. So they're tied in just like that. Now I'm going to crease the stems and now wrap those up the parachute. If I could see here. So I've got those wrapped up. So the other critical thing to realize on a parachute is if you just tie them on the base and then just wrap them around and hope for the best, there's a really good chance that they're not going to face the right direction. Another thing to consider is that the shiny part of the hackle is the side of the hackle that has all the coloration. The other side of the hackle is going to be very dull and muted, almost whitish. So you want to make sure that that color is facing down where the fish can see it. So I'm going to get rid of my stems. Now instead of just starting to wrap here, I'm going to kind of cheat. And the way you cheat is you pull your hackle fibers down just a little bit, and that creates a crease in your hackle so that when you start to wrap it, your hackle fibers are going to be completely horizontal instead of poking up vertically. So I'm going to take both of them at the same time, and because I tied those in with the shiny side facing me when I tied those in, when I start to wrap, now that shiny side is facing down. So I'm going to take those hackles, I'm going to wrap one wrap underneath. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't even dub the thorax. If you don't dub the thorax, then you will get fibers that poke down. So let me do that real fast. Purple dubbing of your choice. Nature Spirit makes one called Purple Haze. But this is one of just some dry fly dubbing mixed with ice dub that I've blended up. So once I get that thorax dubbed, I replace my thread on the parachute, because that's where I'm going to tie my hackle off. So now I can get back to wrapping. You notice I'm not using hackle pliers. And you want to make sure that your hackle's not doing what this one tried to do and slide up the parachute. So now I've got it under control. You can see that it's wrapping really well. I should be able to take one wrap underneath the previous, just like that. So now this is where the rubber meets the road with parachutes. This is where people will grab their hackles and try to tie them off right in front of where the eye is. So this is a really easy way to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to go underneath the wrapped hackle, but on top of the unwrapped hackle, and just wrap 2 times on the post, and now I've tied in my hackle onto the post. We do have a few stragglers though. I made it sound like I wasn't going to do that. So I'll get in here and clean it up a little bit. Okay. So a hackle's tied off on the parachute post. Now the whip finish. That's another way to trap down fibers. So this is the easiest whip finish in the world. What I'm going to do is just take some super glue. We get this angled so you can see it. And I'm going to get my bodkin and just get a little bit of super glue on the bodkin. You can see there, you can't even see it on this black bodkin. Then I'm going to jam that bodkin in right behind the parachute, the last place that I wrapped my thread. And that super glue is going to seep onto the thread that I just wrapped and into that parachute post. And once I do that, I can just come in here and cut my thread. And I've fished this style, I don't know for how many years. I've never had one come unraveled because of that. I've had them come unraveled because Bryce keeps his flies in his mouth while he fishes. But okay, so the final thing that I'm going to do on this is, instead of just cut the parachute post flush, I want to make it look more kind of like a mayfly wing. So I'm going to come in here, angle from front to back, just like that. So it kind of props it up just a little bit. You know, it's going to give you, I don't know how much more of an advantage, but it just kind of makes it a little bit more looking like a mayfly. But anyway, that's a purple haze. I just barely filmed the video for this exact fly, so you guys got to see it before the people on YouTube. So should be dropping here in the next week or so.